Hello, welcome to this section. We are going to be looking at creating a balance sheet and the income statement from the worksheet. And we're going to look at some ways that errors could occur and how you can identify some of those errors. And so the balance sheet shows the assets and the liabilities and the owner's equity that we currently have in the business. And on a specific date. So that's going to be all of your 100 accounts, your 200 accounts, and your capital and drawing account. So everything on the trial balance above income summary. Income summary is going to be our dividing line. And so we are going to pull over all of our debit balances that didn't have any adjustments, just drag those numbers over. The ones that have adjustments, we will subtract that number. So on supplies, we take $620 minus $530, and we end up with $90. On prepaid insurance, we have $900 minus $150, and we have $750. Then we are going to do the same thing with pulling over our credit balances. And then the last one is you pull over is your drawing account. So the income statement shows our revenues and expenses for a fiscal period. And so that's going to be listed in the fifth and sixth column. And again, we're going to have to count for any adjustments, but we first pull over our sales balance. Then any of our expenses that don't have any adjustments, or you can do them all at the same time and just subtract out your expenses, or put in your debit balances for the ones of the expense accounts. So adjust those. So the difference between total revenue and total expense is if the revenue is greater, is it an income? Because if you make more than you spend, you have a net income. So if we're making more than we spend, that means column number 6 is going to be the greater. And so we'll see here that we will have a greater number at this spot if we have a net income. That means to balance it out and figure out what our income is, we subtract these two numbers. And, let me go back and step up. You have to take and total up each of the columns. And then the net income is calculated by the difference between the two, the credit and debit, in your income statement. And the same thing in your balance sheet. And it should be the same difference in both spots. When you total it up, you have another single rule, and you do the totals of each of those, and the 2 for 5 and 6 should match, and the 2 for 7 and 8 should match. If the difference between revenue and expenses is, with the expenses being greater, that meant we spent more than we made, we have a net loss. And so here we see that our expenses was more than our credits by $300. And so we had a loss of $300 this year in this case. And that same thing is going to be pulled over to the debit balance on the balance sheet. So there are some finding and correcting errors. So 3 different types of errors. There may be account error in the accounting records, the data that you're pulling in. There may be errors on the calculations, or you may have entered things in the wrong column. One cool thing is that there are errors in a transposition or where you wrote numbers in wrong order, then you'll be able to divide that error by 9, and it'll give you a nice, pretty number. So in which balance sheet column is the net income recorded on the worksheet? It is a balance sheet credit column. On which column is a balance sheet column recorded for net loss recorded on the and balance sheet column for net loss recorded on the worksheet, and that is the balance sheet debit column. What is the first step for checking for arithmetic errors? The two column totals are not in balance. You want to first find the difference. And one way you can check if it's transposition of numbers is if that number is divisible by 2. Or by 9. And the error, and I forgot to go over this one, the slide error is the error that occurs if numbers are moved to the right or left in the amount of the columns. So that means like if and that is a slide error. So let's go ahead and do our lesson. So the first step is we're just going to be extending the balances. So cash, is it going to go as an income or a balance sheet? It's going to go over to balance sheet. And everything above income summary is going to go over to your balance sheet. So petty cash just slides on over. Our accounts receivable is going to slide on over. Our supplies, though, we have to subtract the difference. And when we subtract that number, we come up with $75. Next, we're going to do our prepaid insurance. We're going to subtract those two numbers, and we come up with $250. Then we're going to go ahead and slide over our accounts payable, but that's going to be as a credit, and that's $267. And we're also going to slide over our capital account, which was $7,443. And then we are going to slide over our drawing account, which we paid ourselves over this time, $1,700. Now we're at income summary. That means we're no longer in the balance sheet section. We're going to go over to our income summary, because this is income summary is where we're dealing with what revenue, what profits did we have, minus our, so we're going to look at, or what losses we incurred. And so our sales is going to slide over as a credit, and that's $21.60. We are going to pull over the advertising expense, $460. We're going to pull over our cash and shorten over. We are going to pull over, oh, wait a minute, we don't have any number there. We have to pull over the adjustment. So you would add these two numbers if they're in the same column. So that would be 125. And miscellaneous expense, we're going to slide over. And again, on a supplies expense, it's not in the trial balance. It came through the adjustment, and it's in the same column as our normal balance. We're going to go ahead and add 153. And our utilities expense was $550. Now, we're going to get down to our totals. And again, I'm using the spreadsheet to help me total up things. So I total up my numbers for that first column. And when I total those numbers up, I come with $1,483. Only one number in our second column, so $21.60. In our third column, our first column of our balance sheet, again, I am going to do the same totaling up. And I'm pulled those numbers over here. Highlight the numbers. $83.87. And then total up the last two, and you can either do it by hand or in the spreadsheet if you want to, and you should come up with 7,710. And we're going to go ahead and grade this step. Now we're going to go on to our next step, which is going to be identifying if we have a net income or net loss. And so when we identify this, we need to identify, do we have more revenue, sales, than we have expenses? The answer is yes. So we have a net income. Which column is smaller? Our expenses. And so that's the one that we are going to put the difference. You always put the difference in the smaller of the two columns. So when we subtract 2160 minus $1,483, we come up with $677. That number should be the same difference between these next two numbers. So 8387 minus 7,710, and you come up with $677. And a smaller number over here is going to be our credit side. And you should always end up with them in opposite columns. So our net income was a credit on the balance sheet of $677. We are going to total up the numbers that have two things in it. And so we're going to add 677 to 1483, and you should get 2160. And when you do, you get 2160. 2160 plus nothing is 2160. 8387 plus 0 is 8387. 710 plus 677 is 8387. And now you're going to do the same thing on your own. Let me know if you have any questions, and don't forget to do the application problem as well.